So many people ask the question when they want to live a life of meaning, how can I do it when I'm around so many people who are operating at lower levels? You've missed the point if you're asking yourself that question. If you're living with somebody, a spouse, for example, family members, people that you work with, neighbors and so on, who are living at lower levels of energy than you cannot be dragged down by their low energy. That's not possible. That's not how the universe works. The reason that you feel dragged down is because you join them in their energy. You become within yourself what they are. In other words, the sentence, "You make me angry, you make me depressed by your behavior," really says that I see your depression, I see your anger, I see your hatred, I see your prejudice, and I'll have some of that too, and I'll hate you for hating me. And I'll be angry at you for being angry at me. Or being around you so depresses me because you're so depressing that you cause me to be depressed. That isn't the case at all. It's because that person's depression is something you decide you'll align with. Now, if you take the reverse, if you take Jesus, who would walk amongst the prostitutes and would walk amongst the thieves, he didn't say, I'm not going to go over there and talk to those thieves. They took my sandals the last time. I'm not having that happen to me again. It's not, and I don't want to be around those hookers because, they're going to be tempting and so on. He didn't do that. When he would walk among the thieves would no longer want to steal. Don't you remember on Golgotha? At the crucifixion? He was between two thieves. Both of them were redeemed by being in his presence. Even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater. That's where you have to be. You have to be in a place, and remember that no amount of your depression is going to undepress somebody else. See, mothers know this. I watch this with the mother of my children, Marcy, a woman I love very, very much. And I would watch her in the middle of the night. I would be laying over here and she'd be here and the baby would cry. And instead of her saying, like so many people speak about, that crying really just upsets me and it really upsets her. Why do you keep crying? It's like, you're just doing it. You're upsetting me. You're making me upset. She didn't do any of that. She didn't say that babies crying would make me depressed. What she would say is, I will bring my high energy of love and healing and feeding to you, and this will help you to raise your level of happiness. And it always worked. For me, a surly waiter is a wonderful challenge. My kids will tell you that. If I get somebody in there and you can tell that they're in a hurry, they're not going to be a little bit rude, they've been rushed and all of that, I know I can turn this person around. And I'll even make it a contest. Say, just watch. It's going to happen. I'm going to get this person turned around. And all you have to do is say to them, I know you're having a tough time tonight, and you probably didn't want to have any more, but I said, you are so lucky tonight. You got somebody who came here to make your life as good as I can possibly make it tonight. Is there anything I can do to make this waiting experience happy for you? What's your name? Where'd you come from? You have an accent? What is it like for you live? And within minutes of just elevating my awareness and being happy and letting them know that this is going to be a pleasant experience for them. And I do this, before you know it, they're bringing you free desserts. We don't have to pay for anything. Here's a complimentary pass. Come the next time. By the way, my mother works over at this place. Would you like to get a massage? Those kinds of things happen all the time. When you get your ego out of the way, when you dissolve your connection to this gross worldly world of conflict, and begin to just say, I can turn this around. The lady who cleans the toilets. Now, to me, anybody who in my life cleans toilets for me and changes my bedding and makes my room nice, that's an angel. That's not somebody that I deserve to disrespect. That's an angel who's come in and willing to serve me and work for very little. That's always, for me, that's $100. I seek her out and I just say, I just appreciate you. And I do this before I go to sleep. I do this before I even take the room. And it's just, a $100 bill to me is a piece of paper. For her, and it isn't even what it does for her financially. It's like what you do is you take people that she looked surly, she looked angry, she looked like she didn't want to be in there, she looked like just another, like white howley in here who's I've got to deal with. She was a lady from Mexico, and she just looked like she didn't. And when I just took her over and I put my arm around her, I said, you know what? I am so happy that you are here to help and serve me, and I just want to express my gratitude to you. You can take every incident of people who are operating at levels that you know keep them tied and connected to the gross worldly realm, and you can shift it. You can shift it. Because you practice a life of meaning is one in which you elevate your awareness to such a place that no matter who enters this realm, if they don't come with love, they don't get in. They don't get in. Inside of this shell of a body, this shell, this thing that I live in, inside here is my inner organs. And inside of those organs is an invisible intelligence. And inside there, in this little chamber inside of me, there's a sign that says, do not enter unless you come with love. So you can insult my body. You can be angry. You can even do things to my insides. But in here, where I live, do not attempt to enter unless you come with love. That's all I have in there. And you can do this.
Chapter 5. Finding Your Way to an Inspired Life. Quote, if we examine every stage of our lives, we find that from our first breath to our last, we are under the constraint of circumstances, and yet we still possess the greatest of all freedoms, the power of developing our innermost selves in harmony with the moral order of the universe, and so winning peace at heart, whatever obstacles we meet. It's easy to say this and to write this, but it always remains a task to which every day must be devoted. Every morning cries to us, do what you ought and trust what may be. Johann von Goethe. When I speak about inspiration and purpose, I frequently hear people ask, but what if I don't really know what would inspire me? Or, how do I find my purpose when nothing seems to resonate with me at the level of bliss you speak about? That's why this particular part of this program and the following ones are dedicated to my heartfelt answers to these questions, which seem most bothersome to those who'd really love to heed their ultimate calling. Just the mere act of questioning our ability to live an inspired life represents resistance that we need to examine because it implies that we're deficient in our spiritual quest. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. In the world of spirit from whence we came, there are no deficits, no lacks or shortages, and there's definitely no such thing as purposelessness. This is an intelligent system that we're a part of. We're divine beings who are a piece of the entire pie of creation. By questioning our ability to activate a connection to inspiration, we give evidence of our lack of belief in our divinity. With this minor reproach in mind, I'll now explain ways to believe in and connect with your ultimate calling. First, in order to put to rest any question regarding your personal right to live an inspired life, we must claim our own divinity, all of us. The fundamental truth each of us needs to affirm is, I am a divine creation. All creation has purpose. I am here to be like God. We should tattoo this statement on our consciousness and wear it proudly. We must begin the process of getting in spirit with a firm declaration from which we never waver. Here's a poetic reminder of this truth from Walt Whitman. Quote, perhaps the deepest, most eternal thought latent in the human soul is the thought of God merged in the thoughts of moral right and the immortality of identity. Great, great is this thought, I greater than all else. Unquote. The thought of God merged in the thoughts of moral right. I love that. Yes, as Whitman says, this thought of being merged with God is greater than any we could ever have. Once we've accepted this, we can move on to knowing why we're here and what inspires us. We can begin to trust in the intelligence that beats our heart 50 or 60 times every minute and at the same time turns the earth once every 24 hours, keeps the planets aligned, and creates every millisecond. Our job is to be as much like the source of all beings as we can be. And the nagging question about what inspires us and why we're here dissolves in this grand desire. Once we declare our holy divine nature to be our essence, rather than something to be verified, it all seems so obvious. The journey to feeling purposeful and inspired begins by seeking to be like God in all of our thoughts and all of our actions. I quoted Goethe at the beginning of this chapter because I consider him to be among the most intellectually and spiritually gifted Renaissance men who ever lived. Ponder on his words thoughtfully as you listen to this program, and keep in mind that every one of us is capable of being inspired every day of our life. After all, this is our entitlement, offered by God, with whom we collaborated before ever arriving here in the first place. Blocking the bliss of inspiration. Basically, we have two choices for meeting any problem that seems to be blocking us from the bliss of inspiration. The first is the way of frailty, in which we assure ourselves that we're weak and incapable. Frustration, grief, fears, and tears are the hallmarks of this choice, wherein we attempt to cure a wrong with another wrong. The frailty method multiplies tensions by focusing on what's missing, and often invites the advice of others in an attempt to resolve our inner tension and lack of inspiration. The second choice is to go within and know that at our core, beyond all physical and mental factors, there resides the spirit that's always connected to God. Any problem, and I emphasize any problem, represents our inability to consciously connect to our source in the moment. With a conscious connection, we don't seek the advice of others, we seek information. So our decisions are made between ourselves and our Creator. We frequently have quiet interchanges with God, and we know and trust that spiritual guidance is available as an alignment of energy. When we feel inspired, we recognize that we need to make a vibrational adjustment that puts our thoughts and behaviors back in alignment with the desire to be inspired. Then, when this realignment takes place, we can laugh at the folly of seeking something outside of ourselves, such as an activity or a job, to inspire us. By simply realigning and harmonizing with Spirit, we let inspiration blossom in the field of harmony. Listening to the voice of God. When we make the decision to become a being of sharing and practice keeping our thoughts harmonized with spirit energy on a daily basis, our purpose will not only find us, it will chase after us wherever we go. Since we've become aligned with our Creator, we won't be able to escape it. You see, when we live as much of life as possible in God realization, nothing can go wrong. What and who we need will surface, and we'll notice that we can't escape feeling that something much greater than our individual life is at work within us and around us. Our number one relationship must be to this creative energy of God. When we go to our source, we activate the energy that reconnects us to our purpose. Inspiration then shows up right before our eyes, even when we may have stopped thinking about it. Our purpose manifests in many ways and won't be limited to a career slot. In fact, it's often something that requires us to leave a particular kind of employment to pursue something we'd never even considered before. We must trust that inspiration is already here. It only eludes us because we've disconnected in some way from the spirit that was and always will be our essence. I recently received a letter from a woman in Kansas that illustrates this message perfectly. Just out of the blue, she felt compelled to do something that she'd never contemplated before, and voila, she was inspired and remains so today. With Gail's permission, here is her letter, which has been edited for clarity. For more on japa, which is a form of meditation, please refer to my book, Getting in the Gap. Dear Wayne, thank you so much for your presentations and tapes. You are frequently my traveling companion as I drive in my job. I just wanted to add my testimony to the power of japa. I was an on and off again meditator, but realized how much more smoothly my days went when I was on it. I visited Kenya, Africa in June of 2002 and met an 8-year-old orphan girl there. As I sat on the ground, she crawled into my lap and a voice said, "Take her home." I physically turned around, but no one was there. Again the voice said, "Take her home." I asked my 18-year-old daughter, who was with me on the trip, what she thought about my adopting this beautiful child. With the quickness of a sprinter, she replied, "Go for it." When we returned to the States a week later, I realized that if I didn't follow through with this adoption, I'd always regret it. Regret seemed much larger than the task of adopting. I began doing japa each morning, and through a series of miracles, the baby was able to come to this country, accompanied by a newly made friend. Nellie's adoption was part 2 of God's plan. Part 1 had unfolded a couple of years before when I felt guided to sponsor a series of workshops for which I profited $10,000 with very little time or work. And guess what the final cost of adopting Nellie was? The first time I heard the voice, I chose to disregard it and or think it through, making lists of pros and cons. But I couldn't rest until I proceeded with the workshops. That's how I explained to my family that I needed to proceed with adopting Nellie. Obedience had brought abundance into our lives, and now it was time to share that abundance. Nellie has brought the abundance of love and forgiveness into our home. She is truly a treasure. Thank you for sharing your gift of this wonderful meditation. It changed my life and the life of a little girl. Sincerely, Gail Beal, Topeka, Kansas. Gail used her meditation practice to stay connected to her Creator, and when a small orphan child in Kenya crawled into her lap, purpose did indeed find her. Gail calls this God's plan, but she's actually a piece of God. She came from God, so she must be like what she came from. Hence, God's plan is her plan, and vice versa. In her meditation practice, Gail heard a voice. That voice belonged to her highest self, the part that never left spirit, is always inspired, and can be heard when allowed to come through. It's a voice that lives in each and every one of us. Creating and holding on to our vision. The desire to find our way to inspiration involves creating a vision of living in spirit 100% of the time. Even if we don't have a clue what we should be doing or what our mission is, we need to practice creating this vision anyway. Our inner picture has to be based on our intention to feel good, which is, of course, synonymous with feeling God, good and God. If we made this an inner mantra, I intend to feel good, we can picture ourselves experiencing joy regardless of what's going on around us. We can remind ourselves that whatever we desire is on its way in amounts greater than ever imagined. If we keep this vision uppermost in mind, then before long, the all-creating source will conspire to bring our vision into our physical life. Most important, we'll begin to act on our vision and receive divine guidance. The truth is that we react to the vision we create and hold, and so do all of the cells in our body. So it's vitally important to hold a clear vision of ourselves as deserving of feeling inspired, knowing that it's our ultimate calling, and choosing to be in spirit even when everything around us suggests otherwise. We need to opt to be a being of sharing, living as close to God realization as is possible. The ancient Persian poet Rumi states this so perfectly with the following lines. Quote, "The garden of the world has no limits except in your mind. Its presence is more beautiful than the stars, with more clarity than the polished mirror of your heart." Unquote. Clear your mind of limits and move into spirit, whose presence, as Rumi tells us, is more beautiful than the stars. Here's a question that Ralph Waldo Emerson posed, which I'd like you to ponder before going on to the next part of this program. We are very near to greatness. One step and we are safe. Can we not take the leap? One step. Surely you can take one step for your own inspired greatness. Part 2, The Fundamentals of Inspiration. Chapter 6, Essential Principles for Finding Your Way to an Inspired Life. Quote, "Well, every man has a religion, has something in heaven or earth which he will give up everything else for, something which absorbs him, which may be regarded by others as being useless. Yet it is his dream, it is his lodestar, it is his master, that, whatever it is, seized upon me, made me its servant, its slave, induced me to set aside the other ambitions, a trail of glory in the heavens, which I followed with a full heart. When once I am convinced, I never let go." Walt Whitman. This chapter presents 6 principles that are important to observe as we seek an inspired life. They're a blueprint to refer to as we reconstruct a life in spirit. I'm listing them here and talking about them in no particular order of importance because I believe they're all equally essential. Principle number 1, be independent of the good opinion of others. There are many well-meaning people in our lives who have ideas about what we should or shouldn't be doing. Relatives tend to be specialists in this area. If we let them guide us with advice that isn't congruent with our inner calling, will suffer the anguish, the slings and arrows, if you will, of an uninspired life. Each of us can feel what we're being called to be. When we pay attention, we can hear our own impatient voices coaxing us to pay attention and complete the assignments we brought with us from the world of spirit. But when we allow the opinions and dictates of others to determine what we're doing or what we're going to be, we lose sight of our objective to live an inspired life. We need to determine for ourselves exactly how much we've allowed others to decide issues such as what we do, where we live, with whom we live, and even how we're treated. We must know that absolutely no one else truly knows and feels what we're here to accomplish. So we must give ourselves permission to hear our inner guidance and ignore the pressure from others. Regardless of how absurd our inner calling might seem, it's authentically ours and doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. The willingness to listen and act on our inspiration, independent of the opinion of others, is imperative. Principle number 2. Be willing to accept the disapproval of others. Logically following the previous principle, this one notes that we're going to incur the disfavor of many people when we follow our inclinations to be in spirit and live the life we came here to live. This isn't a selfish or a cynical attitude. When we begin to follow our ultimate calling, there will be a lot of resistance. In fact, the purpose of the slings and arrows sent our way is to get us to change our mind and be reasonable, which translates to, do it my way. However, as we gain the strength to ignore the pressure to conform, resistance will diminish and ultimately change to respect. When we steadfastly refuse to think, act, and conform to the mandates of others, the pressure to do so loses its momentum. All we have to do is endure some initial disapproval, such as dogmatic persuasion, anger, pouting, silence, and long-winded lectures, and then we're on our way to inspiration rather than frustration. The people who receive the most approval in life are the ones who care the least about it. So technically, if we want the approval of others, we need to stop caring about it and turn our attention to becoming an inspired being of sharing. One little note of caution here. When we raise our children according to these principles, and they observe us living them on a daily basis, we'll have to deal with their determination to respect their inner calling. For example, when my daughter Summer was about 11 years old and I asked to see her report card, I was a bit taken aback by her response. "Why do you want to see it?" she asked me. When I said, "Well, I'm your father, and I think I should know how you're doing in school," she just matter-of-factly replied, "But these are my grades. They're not yours. And if I thought you needed to see them, I would have shown them to you already." I assure you that she wasn't being disrespectful. She simply had no need to share her grades with me. And since I knew that she was doing very well in school, I let it go and let her be who she wanted to be. Principle number 3. Stay detached from outcomes. Inspiration doesn't come from completing tasks or meeting goals. In fact, that's the surest way to have it elude you. Returning to spirit, you see, is an experience of living fully in the present moment. Our purpose in life isn't to arrive at a destination where we find inspiration, just as the purpose of dancing isn't to end up at a particular spot on the dance floor. The purpose of dancing and of life is to enjoy every moment and every step, regardless of where we are when the music stops. Yoga master Sri Swami Sivananda offered the only worthwhile goal I know of when he said that the goal of life is God realization. Now here's a goal that I can live with. After all, this allows me to live in spirit every moment of my life, while simultaneously thinking ahead to the next God-realized moment and the next. As the great Indian sage Ramana Maharshi once remarked, "There is no goal to be reached. There is nothing to be attained. You are the self. You exist always." Now this, to me, is real inspiration. While I was writing the book, Inspiration, Your Ultimate Calling, I didn't really have a goal in mind. I just trusted that the book would be completed. I'd seen it. Even though I was months away from the final product, I lived in the bliss of creating right then, right now, in the moment, and I relished every one of those moments. I trust that the outcome will be handled by the same source that inspires these words to appear seemingly out of nowhere. I'm here, now, in peace, in love, and in awe. And my only goal as I was writing was to stay in this consciousness and enjoy every moment, putting into practice what I agreed to when I was in spirit before coming the particle that began this glorious, glorious journey. Principle number 4. Know that we need nothing, no things to be inspired. We came into this world of boundaries from a formless energy field of spirit. We arrived here with no thing, no things. We'll make our exit with no things, nothing. And our purpose, God realization, requires nothing, no things. We are all that we need to be inspired and living on purpose, and the things that continue to flow into our lives are just symbols of the unlimited abundance of our source. In other words, these things have no value in and of themselves because everything in the physical world is changing and will dissolve back to nothingness anyway. The objective universe is not made up of things. It's made up of waves of motion that simulate the things we're taught to believe are real. Once we accept that, from an infinite perspective, everything we see in nature isn't really what it seems to be, we're able to convert what we view with our eyes into a knowing about all things. Then we can recognize that the objects we believed we needed to feel inspired are nothing from Spirit's perspective. This is what distinguishes the physical person from the spiritual person, the inspired person from the uninspired person. When we tune in to what we know rather than what we see, we immediately find that every thought of God is repeated throughout the universe. We can watch as some things enter our lives and others leave, all the while remaining in spirit, knowing that all of those things have nothing to do with our state of inspiration. We need nothing more to be inspired, since we're connected to spirit already. The ancient Persian poet Omar Khayyam offered us these words, which summarize this principle that we don't need another thing to be inspired. It's all right here, right now. He said, "Forget the day that has been cut off from thy existence. Disturb not thyself about tomorrow, which has not yet come. Rest not upon that which is no more. Live happily one instant, and throw not thy life to the winds." Principle number 5. Don't die wondering. This principle is extremely important in working toward an inspired life because it motivates us to act. After all, we don't want to be full of regrets because we failed to heed our ultimate calling. Attempting to do something, even if it doesn't succeed, is inspiring because we don't tend to regret what we do, we regret what we didn't do. Even following a futile attempt, we're inspired because we know that we gave it a shot. It's wondering whether we should or shouldn't try something that leaves us feeling stressed and incomplete. When I'm playing a tennis match and being tentative in anticipation of losing a point, for example, I've created a situation in which I'll wonder what kind of a game it would have been had I really gone for it. It's in these moments that I remind myself, Wayne, don't die wondering. Inspiration has nothing to do with whether we win or lose. In fact, if we just play the game of life, we'll have plenty of wins and losses regardless of our talent level. If we fail to even try because of fear of rejection or doubt about our talent, we're going to go through life wondering, and that's what keeps us from finding and feeling inspiration. Most of us, myself included, can remember the intensity of our first romantic attraction, just as we can recall what happened when we didn't follow our inspiration. I've always wondered what would have happened if I'd been able to act on that strong inner call in high school when I had an enormous crush on a beautiful girl named Janice Nelson. I wanted to ask her out, but I let my fear of being rejected keep me from taking the steps to act upon my inner desires. On several occasions, I even dialed her phone number and hung up when she answered. I never overcame my foreboding thoughts and, in effect, was left to die wondering. Many years later, I danced with Janice at our 30-year high school reunion and told her how I felt back then. I even confessed the way I'd hang up the phone because of my trepidation. Janice, to my everlasting delight and chagrin, said, "I always had a crush on you, too. I would have loved to have gone out with you, and, in fact, I tried to leave you clues to call me, but you never did." Ouch! That's a perfect example of regretting what I didn't do. Principle number 6, remember that our desires won't arrive by our schedule. There's an ancient aphorism that goes, if you really want to make God laugh, tell God your plans. In essence, this means that all we desire will arrive in our life when and only when we're aligned vibrationally with the energy of our source. Our ego won't be consulted or get to determine the schedule. Creation reveals its secrets when it's good and ready. Our job is to take the focus off of the when and put it on being connected to our originating spirit. Our job is to stop challenging and demanding responses from God and instead be more like God. Our job is to understand and accept that all of the things that show up in our life, which we often find contradictory or troublesome, are there because we've attracted them. And we need to have these obstacles in order to clear an opening for our true spirit purpose to emerge. This may require a change in thinking patterns, which is something Tom Barber knows all too well. Tom is the head golf pro at Griffith Park in Los Angeles and owns and operates the Tom Barber Golf Center in Southern California. His father, Jerry, was the PGA champion in 1961. Tom is a close friend whom I can talk to straight about virtually anything. For example, he once admitted to me that business had fallen off and he was concerned about a deterioration in income due to fewer customers golfing in an economy on the downturn. He'd gone on for about as long as I was willing to absorb this kind of energy when I finally said, "Tom, you're approaching the whole issue from a perspective that almost guarantees that this financial headache will continue to grow. Try affirming, what I desire is on its way. It will arrive precisely on God's timetable, not on mine. Everything that I'm experiencing now is disguised as a problem, but I know that it's a blessing. What I desire is on its way, and it's coming to me in amounts even greater than I can imagine. This is my vision, and I'll hold on to it in a state of gratitude no matter what." I received a letter from my friend about 2 months after our conversation in which he wrote, "Thanks for the pep talk. Once I started to say that the business I'm seeking and the finances I need are on their way, everything started to turn around. What happened is that Tom decided to align with the unrestricted abundance of spirit energy." As you can see from Tom's example, rather than making demands of God to follow our schedule in order to feel inspired, we can let go, surrender, and remind ourselves that all is in divine order. We're much more successful when we allow inspiration to flow in on God's terms than when we're impatient and demanding. As always, our job in God realization is to become more like God. That means surrendering to the timetable that's always perfect, even when it seems to be full of errors. Keep these 6 principles handy and access them anytime you find yourself lacking inspiration. Remember, too, that we're called to this world of inspiration, which beckons us to let go and let God, as they say in the recovery movement. I also love this advice, which was tendered by one of my favorite teachers, Napoleon Hill. If you can't do great things, do small things in a great way. Don't wait for great opportunities. Seize common, everyday ones and make them great. Chapter 7, Inspiration and Your Own Magnificence. Quote, "What is necessary to change a person is to change his awareness of himself." Unquote. Abraham Maslow. Second quote, "You are a primary existence. You are a distinct portion of the essence of God and contain a certain part of him in yourself. Why then are you ignorant of your noble birth? You carry a God about within you, poor wretch, and know nothing of it." Epictetus, a former Roman slave and philosopher. In this chapter, we'll look at our divine magnificence and examine the ways in which we can view ourselves in these terms for the rest of our lives. How would we think and act in daily life if we were truly aware of our divine essence? Obviously, there wouldn't be room to reproach yourself because we wouldn't doubt our abilities. In fact, we'd never look in the mirror and feel anything but love and appreciation. We'd see ourselves as fully capable of attracting all we desire. We'd treat our body with reverence and care, giving thanks for its divine design. We'd celebrate every thought we have, knowing its divine origin, and we'd become aware of our enormous talents and be awed by all that we are. We need to encourage the awareness of our magnificence in every regard. When that awareness has been reawakened, the seedlings of inspiration will begin blossoming. Here's a way of expressing these fundamental truths offered by the writings of the Baha'i Faith. This most great, this fathomless and surging ocean is near, astonishingly near, unto you. Behold, it is closer to you than your life vein. Swift as the twinkling of an eye you can, if you but wish it, reach and partake of this imperishable favor, this God-given grace, this incorruptible gift, this most potent and unspeakably glorious bounty. There's no way to be in spirit without a changed awareness. So when we accomplish this, we give ourselves the gift of moving from being flawed, limited, lacking, and imperfect to being completely comfortable with our magnificence. This unspeakably glorious bounty is so close to us, all we have to do is make a few twinkling of an eye adjustments. So why not begin right now? Here are 3 of the most obvious and important changes in awareness that you can make. 1. Changing the awareness of our magnificent talents and abilities. I want to emphasize an extremely important point. I'm not talking about self-esteem here, nor am I referring to levels of confidence. Rather, I'm saying that we need to keep the important question, who am I, in the forefront of our mind. This question doesn't revolve around previous life experiences, has nothing to do with what we've been told our special qualities or unique abilities are, and it isn't related to how worthy or worthless we feel about ourselves. It has to do with a simple truth. As Epictetus, a philosopher in the 1st century A.D., said, "You carry a God about within you, poor wretch, and know nothing of it." Just like Epictetus, who was born into slavery yet became one of our most profound teachers, we came into this world with an inexhaustible supply of talent. Our abilities are as limitless as God's are, because we're a distinct portion of the essence of Him. And there's an infallible way to begin entertaining those abilities and creating as He does. That way is to become aware that anything that excites us is a clue that we have the ability to pursue it. Anything that truly intrigues us is evidence of a divine, albeit latent, talent that's signaling our awareness. Having an interest in something is the clue to a thought that's connected to our calling. That thought is a vibration of energy in this vast universe. If something really appeals to us and we feel excited but perceive ourselves as devoid of the talent we think is necessary, it's probably an even higher vibration. Anything that's causing excitement within us is evidence of a spirit message that's saying, you can do this, yes you can. If we react to this message with anything other than, you're correct, I can do this, I have the ability to do it, then we've selected the vibration of resistance and ignored the vibration of excitement and interest that spoke to us. Our thoughts about who we are, what excites us, and what we feel called to be and do are all divinely inspired and come with whatever guidance and assistance we'll need to actualize these goals. The decision at this point is, are we willing to listen to these divine thoughts that pique our interest, or do we go on listening to the false self that's made us what Epictetus called a poor wretch? Rather than case studies of which I have only second-hand knowledge, I'm going to use some examples from my own life that illustrate listening to the false self. My background would appear to be an unlikely one for what I'm calling magnificence. Here's what it would look like on paper. Fathered by an alcoholic who abandoned his 3 children, childhood years spent in foster homes, a classic underachiever, educated in public schools, grew up at the low end of the socioeconomic scale, no financial advantages, no examples of or ambitions for higher education, 4 years as an enlisted man in the United States Navy, admitted to a university on a provisional acceptance at the age of 22 due to lower than average grades in high school, worked his way through 3 advanced degrees by being a cashier and a stockboy in a grocery store in Detroit. This isn't exactly what you'd call a prescription for becoming the best-selling author of 28 books and a successful public speaker. I couldn't begin to tell you how many teachers of creative writing and speech gave me low grades for my efforts in these fields. All I can say for certain is that I've always had a knowing about my interest in writing, have always been excited by the prospect of entertaining and informing an audience, any audience. By all of the accepted standards, I didn't have any writing ability. What I did have, and still do, was an interest and a passion for writing. It inspired and thrilled me, and I simply loved it. From the perspective of inspiration, I had the ability to do it, and that's all I needed to know. Then as now, I trusted that the universe would handle all of the details, including, will I be published? Will the critics approve? Will my book be a bestseller? Will my mother approve? Will I get an apology from any of my old English teachers? But really, who cares about any of this? The fact that writing excites me is all I've ever needed to know. When I follow that thought and stay with it, I conclude that I have the ability and the talent. And so do you. Like me, it's easy to find what excites you. What do you find intriguing? Does learning yoga and becoming an instructor interest you? Then you have your answer. The issue isn't about ability, it's about being matched up in spirit with your current thoughts and behaviors. I still remember the excitement I felt at being admitted to a doctoral program, despite the fact that no one in my family had ever entertained such a possibility, and I didn't know one single person who had entered, let alone completed, an advanced degree program. I was excited beyond what I can convey to you here. I knew that whatever I needed in the way of ability and talent would be there. So how about you? Do you live with resistance, or do you allow your enthusiasm and excitement to be a vibrational match to what intrigues you? Keep in mind that as one of God's glorious thoughts, you've originated out of an energy field that knows only possibility. So stay in vibrational harmony with this idea and know that your thoughts, which emerge as interests, excitement, inner thrills, and illuminating sensations, are indications that you have the necessary ability to merge with your magnificent creativity. You came from magnificence, and you are magnificent still. 2. Changing the awareness of our magnificent physical presence. In the previous section, we answered the question, who am I, in spiritual rather than physical terms. Now let's ask a similar question regarding our physical body. Even though we've been living in it ever since we began as an embryo, it's still relevant to ask, what is this body that emerged from spirit? Our body, your body, is made up of chemicals. Far too many for me to elaborate here, but some of them are iron, magnesium, calcium, nitrogen, hydrogen, and on and on and on goes the list. These chemicals are part of a finite supply here on Earth, so what flows through our veins is part of that finite supply. To that end, the iron that's in our blood was once somewhere else, perhaps in a dinosaur, in the body of Jesus, or in a mountain in Afghanistan. And now it's in our body. And when we leave our body, our iron supply will reside someplace else on Earth as a part of that finite supply. In other words, our entire planet is made up of the exact same chemicals that constitute our physical makeup. Chemically speaking, there's no difference between humans and rocks, trees, orangutans, or distant stars. Grind them all up, and their chemical composition isn't what distinguishes one from the other. Our physical presence is a spiritually directed conglomeration of a hodgepodge of chemicals, and the end result is that we're being made up of the same stuff that makes up the stars. We're made up of stardust, that's right, the stuff of dreams, twinkling, magical, beautiful, light-filled stardust. Remember that the spirit from which we originated can create anything, including worlds. So why would it choose ugly or unattractive creations? We're here in the perfect body for our time here in this incarnation, and it's a living, breathing miracle in every way. It's guided and being directed by an invisible force that directs everything and everyone in the universe. It beats our heart, it digests our food, it circulates our blood, it grows our hair, and repairs our cuts and bruises, all independent of our opinion about it. Living in spirit means that we see our body with all of its unique characteristics and feel thankful for the perfect temple that's temporarily housing our true primary existence. If it's short or tall, bald or hairy, stumpy or slender, extend loving appreciation to it every day. If it can't see or hear, resides in a wheelchair or a hospital bed, has crooked teeth or only 3 toes, whatever, love this collection of stardust. A prayerful thought might go like this: I think of my body as a piece of the eternal, an individualized expression of God. I live in spirit, inspired, because I'm the same as the loving energy that created me, which is perfect. Think about the logic of what I'm saying here. Obviously, we can't live a life of inspiration if the physical shell we take with us everywhere is perceived as anything other than a divine, perfect creation. Our attitude toward our body, along with how we feed and exercise it, must match up with spirit. We came from love, so we must extend that love and appreciation to our body at all times in order to be genuinely inspired. 3. Changing the awareness of our magnificent personal history. This third and final element of our inspirational magnificence is perhaps our greatest challenge. How can we look upon all that we've done or failed to do and view it through the lens of our magnificence, especially when we've been trained to feel shame and self-reproach as a result of our perceived failures or flaws? We've all reacted to situations in the past in ways that we wouldn't want to today. I personally have done many things that I wouldn't choose to repeat, yet every recovering or recovered addict looks back with gratitude for the experience that brought him or her to a higher, more loving, sober place. As I've said in other places, true nobility is not about being better than someone else. It's about being better than you used to be. Every single experience in my life, right up to this day, was something I needed to go through in order to get to be here now, writing these words. What proof can I offer for this assertion? It happened. That's all the proof I need. As we look back on our life, we've failed at nothing. All we've done is produce some results. It's imperative that we send love to those who were hurt by us and forgiveness to ourselves to heal our inner agony. We can then view it all as what we needed to experience in order to get to a higher place. One thing I've learned in my 65 years is that virtually every spiritual advance I've made toward a higher, closer alignment with God energy has been preceded by some kind of a fall from grace. Such mistakes, in quote, allow me to write and speak from a more compassionate stance. That is, they always seem to provide me with the energy to propel myself to a higher place. Truly, I bless all of these failures, in quotes, because I know I needed to go there in order to get here. Be gentle and forgiving with yourself. Abandon any and all shame, and refuse to engage in any self-repudiation. Instead, learn from Leo Tolstoy, who said that the most difficult thing, but an essential one, is to love life, to love it even while one suffers, because life is all, life is God, and to love life means to love God. So love life, every moment of it, especially your blunder-filled past. Dr. Abraham Maslow, perhaps the most influential person in my life many years ago, is quoted at the beginning of this chapter as saying, "What is necessary to change a person is to change his awareness of himself." Consider how you might want to follow his advice. You can never be mediocre because you are magnificent in every way. So seek ways to change your awareness of yourself so that you're fully aware of your magnificence and can become receptive to inspiration, your ultimate calling. Chapter 8. Inspiration is simple. Quote, I have lived long enough to learn how much there is I can really do without. He is nearest to God who needs the fewest things. Socrates. 3 keys to keeping life simple. While the theme of this chapter is that inspiration is simple, this doesn't mean that we should sit around doing nothing, waiting Spirit's arrival. Instead, it means having faith that our spiritual connection flourishes in a life dedicated to joy, love, and peace. If our daily activities are so overwhelming that we don't make these 3 things our priority, then we're disregarding the value of living a simple life. Let's now look at each simple key in more detail. Joy. A hectic schedule crammed with non-purposeful activities precludes an experience of inspiration. For example, when we accept obligatory committee assignments or board appointments, requests to write on subjects that don't inspire us, or invitations to gatherings we don't want to attend, we feel joy draining from our body and our spirit. Our life must be open to Spirit's guidance in order for us to feel inspired. When the calendar becomes frenzied, full of unnecessary turbulence because we fail to simplify, we won't be able to hear those long-distance calls from our source, and we'll slip into stress, anguish, and even depression. So whatever it takes to feel joy, we simply must act upon it. Regardless of our current station in life, we have a spiritual contract to make joy our constant companion. So we must learn to make a conscious choice to say no to anything that takes us away from an inspired life. This can be done gently, while clearly showing others that this is how we choose to live. We can start by turning down requests that involve actions that don't correspond with our inner knowing about why we're here. Even at work, we can find ways to keep ourselves on an inspirational agenda. For example, during my years as a college professor, I recall being asked over and over to partake in activities that didn't correspond with my own inspiration. So I devised a simple solution. I took on more teaching assignments, and in exchange, my colleagues attended curriculum meetings, served on research committees, and wrote building improvement reports. I consistently listened to my heart, which always demanded joy. Keep in mind that it's only difficult or impossible to accomplish joy when we engage in resistant vibrational thinking. If we know that we don't have to live a life stuffed with non-joyful activities, then we can choose the way of inspiration. Opting for joy involves giving ourselves time for play instead of scheduling a workaholic nightmare. We deserve to feel joy. It's our spiritual calling. By giving ourselves free time to read, to meditate, to exercise, and walk in nature, we're inviting the guidance that's waiting patiently to come calling with inspirational messages. The bottom line here is that we can simplify life by cutting down on the busy work that keeps us off purpose. We must curtail such activities and listen to Spirit, staying aware of joy and how simple it is to access. Love. Thoughts or actions that aren't tuned to love will prevent inspiration from getting through to us. We need to remember that we came from a source of pure love. So a simple life means incorporating that love as one of the three mainstays of our material existence. On the fateful day of September 11, 2001, what stuck in my mind were the cell phone calls made by the people on the ill-fated planes. Every single call was made to a loved one to connect back in love or to express final words of love. No one called the office or asked their stockbroker for a final appraisal of their financial status, as relationships that weren't love-based didn't enter the thoughts of those who knew they were leaving this physical world. Their top priority was to be certain to close out their lives in love. Tell the kids that I love them. I love you. Give mom and dad my love. Just as love is the priority in the final moments of life, so it must be as we simplify life now. We can go toward a clearer life by examining and purifying our relationships with those we love, with ourselves, and with God. What we're looking for are connections that keep us in an energy of love, which is the highest and fastest energy in the universe. Peace. I know that having inner and outer peace is simply crucial for me. I eschew turmoil, conflict, and agitation, and remove myself from these non-inspiring elements at every opportunity. After all, I can't be the spiritual being I desire to be or live in God realization when I'm engaged in any form of bedlam. Somehow, I've been directed to maintain the peacefulness I crave by having those dormant forces Patanjali spoke about earlier in this program work for me throughout my career. Many people who have a similar semi-celebrity status as myself are surrounded by a long list of people who orchestrate virtually every aspect of their lives. I, however, have chosen a simpler route, and the universe has responded by sending me a very few individuals who've supported my desire for peace. I'd like to spend the rest of this section telling you about each one of them so that you'll have some clear illustrations of how these wonderful people have helped me stay in spirit. Years ago, I realized that I needed help in managing the affairs of my growing enterprise, yet the idea of agents, business managers, advisors, attorneys, accountants, mediators, bodyguards, personal trainers, and any number of people to represent me seemed beyond my tolerance level. Many of those who do what I do, even on a smaller scale, have a large entourage of personal attendants for all manner of duties and activities. And I've had these contemporaries complain to me about being burdened with all of their representatives and spending more than they take in to support the services of all of these individuals. This is not my way. In fact, I have one person who handles almost all of my requirements. One day, while I was running a training session for a marathon, God sent me the perfect person to handle so many of my upcoming unforeseen pressures and requirements in the form of a woman who'd left high school in a foreign country to come to America with her 2 daughters. She doesn't have any fancy degrees or specialized skills, but what she does have is a heart as big as the sky, fierce loyalty, and a willingness to do whatever it takes to learn with on-the-job training. Originally from Finland, but now a U.S. citizen, Maya Labos is the ultimate definition of a multitasker. In 3 decades, she's never said, "I can't do that, it's not my job." She manages every request, answers my mail, books all of my talks and my appearances with the media, takes me to and from airports, maintains my personal privacy by deflecting low-energy requests, and deals with the hundreds of appeals I get for endorsements and writing requests. Yet she also handles innumerable tasks, including grocery shopping, vitamin purchasing, office tidying, or bringing clothes to the cleaners. I can count on her to take care of everything and anything I need. When I met Maya almost 30 years ago, she was completely broke. Today she owns her own home by the ocean and is my best friend, confidant, and associate. You see, when we're open to matching up our desire for peace and simplicity with the peace and simplicity from which we originated, God sends what we need. In my case, I got an entourage of one to handle what myriad specialists can't do for so many of my contemporaries. Every writer needs an editor. Almost 30 years ago, God saw this and sent one to me in the form of the enormously well-read and competent Joanna Pyle. She's been my one and only editorial person for the 28 books I've written. I don't submit to editorial boards. Joanna does for me what many writers ask for from their team of editors, editorial assistants, line editors, rewriters, revisers, amenders, annotators, and so on. I want to keep it simple, and Joanna knows how I write. She's also the only person who can read my scribbles since I write in longhand. As the computer age dawned on the publishing world, Joanna trained herself to meet these newly emerging technological requirements. She didn't ask me to write on a computer or to change anything. She knows my desire for simplicity and peace, and she accommodates me perfectly. When I finish a chapter, I send it to Joanna with complete trust that she'll edit it in such a manner that it will be consistent with my original intent. She transcribes it, types it, reorganizes it, and computerizes it, all with a smile and genuine gratitude for being able to fulfill her purpose. Joanna is me. I am Joanna. Once I was able to convince her to leave her non-fulfilling employment as a flight attendant and pursue her bliss as an editor full-time, she was finally able to feel the joy and peace that comes from matching up her energy with her desires. She lives inspiration, and she allows me to do the same. I only employ one individual who handles any and all matters related to the complexities of taxes, particularly where foreign royalties are concerned. I don't use a team of legal experts who charge by the hour or tax consultants who receive as much as what I owe the government. One man, Bob Adelson, knows my desire for peace by keeping it simple, so he organizes everything for me. He works diligently and thoroughly, doing what he loves, and I treasure his presence in my life. In 1976, after Your Erroneous Zones was published, I decided to move from New York to Florida. I knew absolutely no one in my new hometown, yet I needed an investment person whom I could trust to help me with the bonuses I'd received from the success of my first book. Having been a teacher and university professor before this point with no experience in or money for investing, I knew practically nothing about this world. While contemplating how to start an investment portfolio, I pulled into a gas station, filled my tank, and drove away without realizing that my wallet, which contained $800 in cash, had fallen out of the car and was lying next to the pump. Just a few hours later, a man called to tell me that he'd found my wallet, including the cash. I went to meet John Darling, who was my angel sent from God to take care of all of my investments for the next 29 years, and he continues to be one of my very best friends and confidants. When I needed someone I could trust, the universe sent me a stranger who returned my $800, and I've never had a moment of non-peace regarding investments in the past 3 decades. John has managed it all for me, always keeping in mind how I like things to be simple, risk-free, and uncomplicated, knowing what my ultimate investment objectives were and what I desired for my family. I left a large, prestigious New York publishing firm to work with Hay House, mainly because everything in the Big Apple was becoming way too complex. My former publisher employed wonderful people, but the company was too big. It had too many tentacles, too many unkept promises, and way too many departments that weren't in harmony with each other or with me. I felt that too often I was being told it's not our fault. The fault is over there in finance, or over there in marketing, or over there in distribution. It was like a 20-headed monster. I voted once again for tranquility and simplicity, and once again God sent me a gift, this time in the form of the president and CEO of Louise Hay's publishing company, Hay House. When I met Reed Tracy, we clicked almost immediately. This man, who's unafraid to roll up his sleeves and unload trucks even though he's in an executive position, promised me personal attention, and he delivered. We talked every day about a publishing company that didn't get so big that it forgot to take care of its authors. Reed promised me no large conglomerates and said, if you have a desire, make it known to me, and I'll act on it. I loved the lack of complications, since I didn't wish to be in a large business labyrinth any longer. Simplify, simplify, simplify. It has been a glorious experience for both Reed, whom I now consider one of my closest friends, and myself. I wanted peace as a writer, and Louise Hay, whom I've long admired, and her fine president have allowed me to create in peace. As you can see, I've chosen to allow the world of spirit to send me those individuals who have helped rather than hindered me. Without these fine people and their treasured friendship, I wouldn't be able to be here in Maui, playing tennis, doing yoga, walking on the beach. But mostly, I'm able to write from my heart and do it in peaceful ease, knowing that the universe has taken care of all the details in its own divine way. When you desire peace, simplicity, and honesty, and send out a matching vibration to those desires, all I can say is start watching. It's on its way. A man who personified success at the highest intellectual and social levels would hardly seem one to quote on simplifying our life. Yet here's what Albert Einstein offers us on this subject. Possessions, outward success, publicity, luxury, to me, these have always been contemptible. I believe that a simple and unassuming manner of life is best for everyone, best both for the body and the mind. Wow. Chapter 9. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Quote, neither does anyone, however many wounds he may have received, die unless he has run his allotted term of life. Nor does any man, though he sits quietly by the fireside under his roof, escape the more his fated doom. It's written by a great philosopher and playwright named Aeschylus. Inspiration requires faith. After all, returning to spirit while in our physical body is unlikely to be successful if we don't believe that it's possible. We may even have to focus on renewing our faith prior to accessing inspiration, since faith allows us to trust and thereby make use of the vast power that's responsible for creating every physical object in the universe. Faith is an internal knowing that the all-creating spirit provides what we need precisely on schedule. This doesn't mean that we don't have a voice in what happens to us. We do. But the voice only becomes activated when we get our ego out of the way and realign with spirit. When our spirit works with the divine spirit, we can participate in creation and truly know the meaning of this chapter's title, There's Nothing More Powerful Than an Idea Whose Time Has Come. There's perfect timing in the universe, and our arrival on earth was a part of that synchronicity. In other words, we were an idea of God's whose time had come. This chapter introduces the concept of perfect timing and how to believe in it, notice it, tune into it, and apply it. Faith banishes all doubt. We know that ego has virtually no control over what happens to us. Our body grows, develops, changes, and declines independent of ego's desires or opinions. We know that eventually we'll shed this garment we've been wearing for a lifetime, not when our ego decides, but when that idea's time has come. Re-listen to the quote by Aeschylus at the beginning of this chapter about our allotted term of life as an example of what I'm referring to. Aeschylus was the most famous playwright and scholar of his era, and he claimed direct divine guidance in his writing. He was also a contemporary of Socrates, Lao Tzu, Zoroaster, Buddha, and Confucius, who all lived during the 5th century BC. It's intriguing to note how many visionaries were on the planet simultaneously. Basically, he tells us that the shape of life must run its allotted course, and that we're here to do what spirit intends. According to Aeschylus, we'll leave Earth and shake off our physical body in concert with spirit's plan for us. Whether we're ready at age 17, 25, or 105, he advises us to trust in our source. I add to this message that at whatever age we hear these words, it's the right time to realize that we're in the process of surrendering to spirit for the remaining portion of our allotment. The question now becomes, can we join with spirit and play a decisive role in what ideas, happenings, events, or people will show up for us? The answer to me is a resounding yes. Recall once again those words of Patanjali that I shared in the opening chapters. When you are inspired, dormant forces, faculties, and talents become alive. You see, we must have faith in a universe that's created and guided by an intelligence greater than our ego, one where there can be no accidents. When an idea's time has come, it can't be stopped, but by raising our vibration to match that of the universal source of being, we can bring about that idea's time. We can raise our level of consciousness from ego and group dominance to what I call visionary consciousness, in which we reconnect to the mind of God. We banish all doubt by our knowing, which is a higher level of consciousness than believing. Our vision is God's vision, in a manner of speaking. Let me offer you an example of how this visionary consciousness plays out. One of my greatest teachers, and a man I now call my friend, is Ram Dass. He lives from the spiritual faith I'm writing about without doubts or fears. I'd been a long-distance follower and devotee of his for 30 years, always knowing that we'd connect in person. I had this knowing without ever needing to hurry or force what I sensed was a future connection in his and my lifetime. And when that idea's time came, Ram Dass moved to Maui, where I'm writing to you and speaking to you right now, in this moment. Today I have the great pleasure of being in the service of my teacher, helping him in these advanced years of his life. The following self-explanatory letter that I wrote recently is posted on my website, drwaynedyer.com. I'm including it here to precisely illustrate how what I'm relating in this chapter can unfold. One of the truly great men of our time needs our help, and I write these words to encourage your generosity and support. Back in the 1960s, a Harvard professor named Richard Alpert left behind the hectic world of academia and traveled to India. There he was to meet his spiritual teacher, who gave him a new purpose to fulfill, along with a new name. He, of course, is Ram Dass. His guru told him, love everyone, feed people, and see God everywhere. Ram Dass became a person who lived out this mandate, doing what so many of us could only dream. He connected to his spirit and devoted his life to serving others. In 1969, he wrote and published the signature book on spirituality and applied higher awareness, Be Here Now. In keeping with his commitment to love everyone and feed people, he donated all of the royalties and profits to foundations that did just that. With millions of dollars at stake, Ram Dass simply chose to live his life as a man of service to God. After years spent in India in pursuit of a higher, more enlightened consciousness for himself and for our troubled world, he returned to the United States to lecture throughout the country. He spoke to packed venues wherever he went, and as always, he donated the proceeds to such causes as would keep him in harmony with his mandate to serve. He co-founded the Seva Foundation, www.seva.org, and his writing and lecture fees were primary sources for this compassionate and inspired work. To me, Ram Dass was and is the finest speaker I have ever heard, period. He was my role model on stage, always gentle and kind, always speaking without notes from his heart, sharing his inspiring stories, and always with great humor. I tell you this from my own heart. I could listen to his lectures for hours and always felt saddened when they would end. He was the voice for applied spirituality. His life was the model. When he was threatened by having his own private sexual preferences exposed in a time when a closet was the only place that was even mildly safe, Ram Dass called a press conference and proudly announced his preferences to the world. He paved the way for tolerance and love when no one else would dare to do so. Most of us could only dream of defying the conventional life and living out our inner callings to promote a cause that was bigger than our own lives, to leave the security of a guaranteed career in a country where comfort was ensured, all to live in a foreign land with few conveniences, traveling and meditating for a more peaceful world. It's what St. Francis did in the 13th century, and what Ram Dass did in our lifetime. When Ram Dass's father, who had largely criticized his son's unconventional lifestyle, was close to death, Ram Dass devoted himself to 100% service in those final years. He fed his father, he bathed his father, he placed him on and off the toilet until the day he died. Why? Because he felt this was his mandate. He wanted to experience true service on a 24/7 basis and know firsthand the joy that comes from giving one's own life away in the service of others. Always, for over 30 years, Ram Dass was in the service of others. In 1997, Ram Dass was struck by a semi-paralyzing stroke and became wheelchair-bound. Still, he wrote of his adventure in a powerful book titled Still Here. He continued to travel, although he could no longer walk, and continued to speak to audiences, although he spoke from a slowed-down body. But still, he did it, and he did it to serve others. Now it's our turn. Ram Dass's body can no longer endure the rigors of travel. He's come to Maui, where I live and write. I speak with him frequently, and am often humbled by the tears in his beautiful 74-year-old eyes as he apologizes for not having prepared for his own elderly health care, for what he now perceives as burdensome to others. He still intends to write and teach. However, without the travel, we can now come to him. Maui is healing. Maui is where Ram Dass wishes to stay for now. He is currently living in a home on Maui which he doesn't own and is in jeopardy of losing. I am asking all of you to help purchase this home and to set up a financial foundation to take care of this man who has raised so much money to ensure the futures of so many others, to live out what Ram Dass has practiced with his actions. Please be generous and prompt. No one is more deserving of our love and financial support. In the end, any donations will help ensure that Ram Dass and his work will reach another generation, or remind a current generation that it is in giving that we receive. If there has ever been a great spirit who lived in our lifetime, literally devoting his life to the highest principles of spirit, it has been Ram Dass. I love this man. He has been my inspiration and the inspiration for millions of us. It is now time to show him how we feel by doing what he has taught all of us to do. Just be here for him now. If you're inclined, please send any donations to Ram Dass, care of Hay House, at P.O. Box 5100, Carlsbad, California, 92018. Truly, giving is receiving and vice versa. Ram Dass lived a life of giving by staying in spirit. I was sent to this man who has meant so much to me. I always had a knowing that I'd be involved in his mission and his life. It was an idea that I held in spirit for several decades, and now its time has come and cannot be stopped. If you feel called to help, you can send in any contributions, and I will see that it goes directly to Ram Dass. It was Ram Dass's total belief in what his spiritual teacher told him to do with his life that allowed this all to unfold. When we banish all doubt in favor of faith, there's nothing more powerful on this planet. You must believe, and then you'll see it unfolding right before your eyes. Spirit's timing at work. The power of an idea whose time has come is really the power of spirit at work. Equality for all is how God is, for instance, and we seek to be like God. When enough of us, along with one or two at visionary consciousness, begin to contemplate these in-spirit ideas, they can't be stopped. Let's take some time here to note a few such ideas from America's history. When it was time for the unspeakably horrid practice of slavery to be abolished, that was an idea whose time had come. This was because a critical mass of individuals with a new vision for humanity began to contemplate something that had been espoused a few generations earlier. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. It took more than 85 years after Thomas Jefferson wrote these words, but then the idea couldn't be stopped. Even though slaves represented a tiny part of the population and had no voting rights, when a man with visionary consciousness, Abraham Lincoln, along with many others, approached this idea from an inspirational perspective, it was clear that the time had indeed come to end slavery. This new idea of equality for all is the way of spirit. Next, we can see also an idea whose time had come in the granting of voting rights for women in 1920. Despite the opposition of a non-visionary president, Woodrow Wilson, and over the objection of a majority of men who had voting privileges, the idea couldn't be stopped. Several visionary women who aligned with many other men and women believed and made it happen, a right that we take for granted today. Next, the racial integration of the United States is another example of an idea whose time had come. When this concept began to surface in the visionary consciousness of a few people such as John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Lyndon Johnson, and Rosa Parks, it couldn't be stopped. Despite the objections of millions of people, many of whom were in positions of political power, today, in schools that once practiced segregation, we have a multiracial student body. It's still in the process of manifesting everywhere in our society, but make no mistake about it, this idea cannot be stopped. Next, gay rights is another idea whose time has come. One of the many reasons I admire Ram Dass so much is the stand he took a long time ago on equal rights for people of all sexual orientations. No individual or group can be denied legal or social privileges because we all come from one source, which excludes no one. An idea whose time has come is always in perfect alignment with our originating spirit. And finally, the shift in consciousness from a collective belief that smoking in public places is permissible to one where it's not tolerated was an idea whose time had come. The idea became unstoppable when one visionary airline banned smoking on their commercial flights, and then the rest fell into spiritual alignment. When we come from a non-toxic source of well-being, aligning with it is our destiny, and it can't be stopped. I could go on with examples of such ideas manifesting in our society. But instead, I propose that we begin looking around us for evidence of ideas whose time has come. You see, when we're ready, willing, and open to it, the divine guidance we seek will spring into action on our behalf. It has been that way throughout our life. We're in a system that's directed by a supreme intelligence, and we're part of that system. Everything is on purpose. Our vibrational matchup determines what we attract and what we repel in our life. We needn't focus on what's already happened and what we've gone through. Rather, we must shift our vibration upward so that it harmonizes with spirit, and then and only then will spiritually based ideas come knocking on our door. These ideas won't give up or go away because, as we know, there's nothing in this universe more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Our responsibility is simply to become beings who expect and await inspired ideas that will not and cannot be stopped. Truly, there's absolutely nothing in this universe, including ourselves, that isn't perfectly timed. There are no wrongful deaths or mistakes. What shows up is ours, and it showed up precisely on schedule. Before we move on to part 3, I'd like you to think about the simple wisdom that the former slave and philosopher Epictetus imparted to us nearly 2,000 years ago. It is my business to manage carefully and dexterously whatever happens. Now there's a powerful idea whose time has come.